Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a little overwhelming to receive an honor like this. I am, for the most part, I keep my religious and spiritual life private, although of late my zone of privacy has been compressed to be a very small area. But I thank you for being here. Thanks to Elder Buchner, who is truly a friend and has been a great partner in developing and strengthening the relationship of the LDS community to many in New York, and for that I'm grateful. I am, if you are New Yorkers, I am your lawyer, and for my fellow attorneys here, and I know this is a professional association, I'm not trying to poach your clients, but I do represent all of the people of the state of New York as well as the institutions of the state of New York. And it's a great honor to have the New York Latter-day Saints Professional Association bestow this award on me, and I want to say special thanks to a couple of very consummate LDS professionals, Elder Gordon Smith and our special guest, Elder Christofferson, who distinguished attorney, among other accomplishments in life. And it is something that this does mean a lot to me, and it means a lot also to have, you have quite a distinguished interfaith audience here. I know Rabbi Potasnik of the Board of Rabbis was here, my friend Monsignor Sullivan from the Archdiocese is here, and it is, and we're in one of the great houses of worship in New York, and I do plead guilty to a little New York parochialism, but this is a place where incredible sermons have been preached, incredible events have been organized, amazing men and women of faith have come for years, so it does mean a great deal to me, and it does mean, actually, it's a special honor to receive the Visionary Leadership Award the year after someone I truly admire, His Eminence Cardinal Dolan. That makes it even more special. And we're also finally joined by the Dean of Attorneys General, not just for New York, but the country, Robert Abrams, my distinguished predecessor. So thank you all for being here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I take my profession as a lawyer very seriously. I am very proud of the tradition of American lawyers and of the deep understanding that we are a nation of laws, and the idea of the rule of law, not the rule of a monarch, was what made us really different than any other nation that existed. And I see in the commitment to the rule of law something that really, to me, is a logical extension of parts of the Jewish tradition, where famously Moses' father-in-law instructed him essentially how to set up a legal system and appoint judges. I've been pretty open about the fact that while my professional vision is very much grounded in the American tradition of law, the law books don't tell you what's right and wrong. That you have to look to a different set of books for, and my grounding in the Jewish tradition is the basis for my essential understanding of right and wrong, and the foundation of the legal work I do every day to further the essential American ideal of equal justice under law, which to me is also an essential ideal in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And I'm pleased to be honored by fellow professionals who seek to ground good work in your spiritual tradition and who understand that to be effective and to retain your integrity in any profession in these turbulent times, you need to be grounded in something other than the transactional day-to-day of life. Now, before I became the New York State Attorney General, I didn't really know that much about the LDS community. During the course of my first statewide campaign, I was traveling around the state, and it became very apparent to me that New York had become more and more religiously pluralistic and diverse, and that we as a state really had to do a better job of preventing discrimination against New Yorkers based on their religious practices. And at the time, the United States Attorney General had an office focused on religious discrimination, but we did not have one in the New York State Attorney General's office. So after I was elected, I launched our office's Religious Rights Initiative to ensure that every New Yorker has a right to worship as they wish and to have full free exercise of their religion, not just on one particular designated day, but in all of their lives, without fear of attack or persecution. And as we set that up, we reached out to many faith leaders, and that is how I first got in touch with and began what has become a deep, rich, and rewarding relationship with New York's LDS community. The Area 70 at the time was Elder Jeff Olson, and after we started talking, I said, well, come to services at my synagogue, which Friday night, you're all welcome anytime. And it was around the time of the Jewish holiday of Purim, and Elder Olson knew the entire Torah story. He knew about the Megillah, Esther, Mordecai, the whole liturgy. He was clapping with the music. The congregation loved him. I didn't think we'd ever get him out of there. And so he was so, and then when we went not long after that, went to attend services at the LDS chapel down near Lincoln Center. He made a point of talking to the congregation about his experience and stated that at our synagogue, the Spirit was very strong. And I can say with assurance that in the LDS chapel, it was also clear to me that the Spirit was strong as well. And it was through this set of experiences that I had my own epiphany, and I had a very strong sense, and this may be something that some people take for granted, but I was very much struck by the incredible respect and reverence with which the LDS community treats Jewish traditions and treats the Jewish faith. And as I learned more about your teachings and history, I came to feel that there really is a deep bond between Jews and Mormons, and have sought to further that bond in my work. We both experienced persecution and committed ourselves to opposing the persecution of others. We've both felt the sting of hatred and the wrath of government-sanctioned discrimination, and both our teachings and our rituals overlap in remarkable ways. This sense of connection was powerfully reinforced for me last year when I had the great honor with Elder Smith and others to get a tour of the newly completed temple in Philadelphia. When I got to the oxen-sized bronze oxen honoring the spiritual and historical significance of the ancient Temple of Solomon, I was truly blown away. It was a tremendous experience, and I was reminded of the words of the founder of the State of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, who once said, "There are no people in the world who understand the Jews like the Mormons." And I certainly can say that in your company, I have felt understood and have sought to understand. So I'm deeply honored to be here tonight to receive an award which I feel marginally worthy of. But this is a time of challenges and opportunities that face people of faith and our nation as a whole. And it is important for us to gather together and affirm our bonds and affirm our commitment to a truly just and free society. We are living in a time of social and political turbulence. And we're living in a time when divisive voices of bigotry are louder than they've been in my lifetime. And the far-reaching echo chamber of the internet now gives those voices a greater reach than they ever have had before. Overt attacks on people's religion, proposals for religious tests for immigration, the revival and celebration of anti-Semitic rhetoric from the 1930s is all a part of a dissonance that seems to have replaced more civil public debate and discourse in much of our nation. So I am confident that we will come through this period of challenge stronger than we went into it, because I am a student of American history. America is not a nation that ever was defined by a sense of sort of blood and soil nationalism. It certainly was not a nation defined by adherence to any specific creed. This country was founded on some remarkably high ideals, that all are created equal, all are entitled to equal justice under the law, and that all of us in public life, when we swear to uphold the Constitution, commit to protecting the free exercise of religion for all. And though we have often fallen short of these ideals and had periods of struggle, it is the job of every generation of Americans to make the country, in the words of the Constitution, ever more perfect. The United States was explicitly formed to establish a more perfect union. That is in the preamble to the Constitution. No one pretended we had it together at the outset, but we took on the collective mission of striving towards this national ideal. And the American story is a story of progress, of generation after generation, working to overcome prejudice through great social and political movements, the abolition movement, the women's suffrage movement, the civil rights movement, and leading us to greater justice and equality year after year after year. It is a story of people of all faiths who, sometimes at great personal risk, have stood up against intolerance and for religious freedom. And I now understand how much the Mormon Church has been a champion of religious freedom for all. As I've spoken out often against the rise of bigotry and intolerance and hate speech in recent years, I have often enjoyed quoting New York's own Joseph Smith when he said, "If it has been demonstrated that I have been willing to die for a Mormon, I am bold to declare before heaven that I'm just as ready to die in defending the rights of a Presbyterian, a Baptist, or a good man of any denomination." It always throws people when I throw in a Joseph Smith quote. But how much more powerful a statement can you have of the commitment we have to all make now to protect the religious freedom of all and the rights of all? That sense of justice, that sense that all people must be equal under law, that all faiths must be equal under law, that undergirds the American experiment. Justice is what I try to focus on every day in my work. And I would suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that there's nothing the books of Moses or the Old Testament focuses on or talks about more than the pursuit of justice. In the book of Micah, we're told that the Lord demands us to do justice or do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. In Deuteronomy, we're admonished, "That which is altogether just shall thou follow, that thou mayest live and inherit the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee." In Hebrew, there are actually two words for justice, mishpat and tzedek. Mishpat means to apply the law formally and equally, do what the law requires in all situations. It is a more formal, legalistic term. Tzedek is a little more nuanced. It means the right thing to do. So even as we apply the law, we must also make sure that the final result comports with a basic sense of right and wrong. As we say in more contemporary language, you must temper justice with mercy. And when you put them together, mishpat tzedek means righteous justice. I am blessed to have as your lawyer my day job, the pursuit of mishpat tzedek, the pursuit of righteous justice. And I believe that righteous justice and our commitment to righteous justice must be at the core of our efforts to push back against the resurgence of religious discrimination and hate speech in America. You don't beat hate with more hate. You have to be grounded in the sense of righteous justice. And I've spoken about this often, and through my relationship with the New York LDS community, I've become much more sensitive to the history and the issues related to discrimination against Mormons. And shortly before last year's election, I actually wrote an op-ed column about the religious bigotry faced by Mormon presidential candidate Evan McMullen. He was being attacked really viciously in this sort of the echo chamber of the internet, and prominent online voices had alleged that he was a part of a secret cabal referred to as the Mormon Mafia. Some even had called for a Mormonocaust, a horrifying reference to the Holocaust. But these attacks were really not getting much attention in most of the country, where people were focusing on anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic language, but not the prejudice against the LDS community. So I decided to write about it. And as I wrote in my column, prejudice against any religion is pernicious, and those who would offer themselves up as defenders of religious liberty have to apply one standard to all faiths. I challenged public officials to oppose anti-Mormon sentiment as vigorously as anti-Semitism, anti-Catholicism, or any other religious persecution. And I think that through the work that we've been doing together, I can see a shift in perspective in New York And I can see that the power of the LDS community's opposition to discrimination in any form, this is becoming better known and better understood. And I'm proud of the work we do in the Attorney General's office to try and combat religious intolerance. As I mentioned earlier, our Religious Rights Initiative has enabled us to protect a lot of people. It was remarkable. The large corporations and even public agencies, when I first started this out, that had no accommodation policy for people who were trying to observe the Sabbath. And we were able, thankfully, to resolve virtually every one of the cases we discovered with people they were acting more out of ignorance and out of a desire to discriminate. But we developed these strong relationships with the faith-based leadership in many communities, and those connections have proved to be very important particularly during the last year, as some religious and ethnic groups have found themselves really truly frightened by the rhetoric and some of the policies coming out of our nation's capital. With input from religious and community leaders, my office has led an effort to involve all local law enforcement agencies in New York in understanding how they can protect people from discrimination, enforce civil rights laws even if the federal government won't, and enforce New York's own laws against bias-related violence. We've held interfaith forums to unite people in support of our Muslim brothers and sisters or anyone else who is facing discrimination. And we had one great forum in Westchester with Christians, Muslim, Jews, I think even a few Buddhists, that was hosted by the LDS community in Westchester, and some are here tonight who were at that forum. We've also expanded our work with our colleagues in state and local law enforcement and redoubled our commitment that whatever happens in Washington, and I pray for the time when it becomes a more civil place that can get more accomplished. But until then, our federalist system has created safe havens in state governments, and state actors like state attorneys general, we can enforce the laws and protect people. We can model smart, effective governance. And my commitment is to do that in collaboration with everyone who will work with me in states around the country, and that collaboration has been extraordinary. And I have found that my office's connection to religious communities helped us when collectively a group of state attorneys general challenged the president's unconstitutional, un-American, anti-Muslim travel ban when on January 27th, the day the first travel ban was issued. It's a Friday afternoon. You may remember there was chaos at airports all over the country, and I got on the phone with my counterparts around the country, and by Sunday, we had 17 state attorneys general representing more than 130 million people issue a statement that this was unconstitutional, that we would never tolerate religious discrimination against any religion or any sect, and that we would go into court to stop this, and we did. And we've received, we've obtained injunctions against each of the incarnations of the travel ban, and send a message that religious intolerance is not something that we will put up with, and that if it's not going to be defended at the federal level, we will step in and use our powers under the federalist system to do that. And thank you. And support for the cause came from around the country. Tremendous support in the business community in New York, interestingly enough. This is just the finance community, the tech community, the healthcare community. They did not want anyone messing with the tradition of New York being open for all. And I was particularly struck by an amicus brief filed by a group of scholars in the LDS community and people who had studied the Mormon Church about how the church's own history of persecution should be looked at by policymakers today as providing an important lesson. And the brief said, in part, that the Mormon Church's history, quote, demonstrates the ease with which exaggerated fears of religious minorities, regarded as different and dangerous by some Americans, can be translated into government policies that treat them as outsiders, not full members of the political community. And as we have continued to fight the various incarnations of the travel ban, and we've fought to guard the system of justice and the rule of law for all, I've kept that admonition in my heart. And as I say, we've had great success in that. We also are defending the DACA program and defending the right of the Dreamers to remain here. And we just had a very positive ruling today in that case. And are looking forward to some good support, interfaith amicus briefs on that one also. So all of this has made my experience as Attorney General really, it was always an incredible job. I love being the people's lawyer. I love representing all of the people of New York, citizens and non-citizens, I must say. And I'm honored to be your lawyer and a guardian of our system of justice. But I do believe that as we make our way through this challenging period of history, we must really recommit ourselves in our work every day to protecting and promoting righteous justice. This is a time for the commitment to Mishpat Tzedek, to be bolder and for us to reach out across whatever perceived divisions there may be, because that which unites us is so much more powerful than anything that might divide us. We are not admonished in the Torah to think about justice. In the book of Micah, we're told to do justly, not talk about justice or think about justice. We are instructed to do justice, to act justly. It is our obligation as Jews, as Christians, as Mormons, but it is fundamentally our obligation as Americans, because that sense of the biblical admonition to do justice shows up right at the beginning of this great American Republic. The first item on our to-do list, we seek to form a more perfect union in order to, in the first item, before providing for the common defense or the general welfare, is to establish justice. So that is the tradition that I seek to follow, and I seek your commitment to and support in the weeks and months ahead. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't really care. I do care because it shouldn't happen. But if the federal government pulls back from its responsibility to protect the most vulnerable and to protect religious freedom, states will take up the cause. We've shown that we can do it. And if you'll indulge me in a moment of parochialism, part of the tradition of New York is a tradition of openness. And this goes back to its time as New Amsterdam, when, unlike many colonies, this was not set up to be a haven for one particular religious group. And it was a very pluralistic community from the beginning. In 1654, Peter Stuyvesant, who was then the Dutch governor, started several efforts to exclude other religious groups, all of which were overruled and defeated by the people of New Amsterdam and even by the Dutch West India Company, where his bosses were. The first ships of Jews coming from South American colonies sought to enter New York, and he wrote back to his bosses saying, "We don't have to take these people, do we?" And they wrote back and said, "No, you actually do have to take these people. New Amsterdam is to be open to all." And the first Rosh Hashanah services in North America were conducted here at a synagogue that exists to this day. And as I've learned more about the history of the LDS Church, I have come to understand that New York did not always live up to this commitment. And back in the 1830s, we may have fallen down. But I am pleased to be here tonight to state, as New York's top law enforcement officer, that the LDS community is and always will be welcome in New York, and that you are a valued part of our great state. And beyond that, understand that I and a lot of other non-Mormons will fight to protect your right to the free exercise of your religion with every tool in our constitutional toolbox. Freedom for one means freedom for all, and we have that commitment deeply held that we share. New York remains and must remain open to all. So I thank you for your unwavering commitment to opposing religious discrimination in any form. I thank you for the amazing service that you do here and around the world. But the LDS community does not give lip service to service. You do service. And you are a part, and I thank you for this, of all you've done a lot towards this goal that I spoke of earlier, to make our American Union a little more perfect. I thank you for what you do for our country. I thank you for what you do for our state. And for having me here tonight and giving me this special honor, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.